Hello and welcome to episode 11 of Crestie Conversations here on the Geckoverse podcast channel. I'm your host, Josh, with Georgia Cresties. Now, last time on the podcast, we were learning about lineage and why that is important for crested geckos and how that can affect your gecko and your future breeding pairs. So, if that's something you're interested in, go ahead and go give that a watch. All right, so this week on Crestie Conversations, I wanted to start out by saying thank y'all for being flexible with me. I am here on a Wednesday instead of a Tuesday, but I promise I will be back to the regularly scheduled Tuesdays very soon. I just started a new position at work, so I had to grind a little bit, but now I will be able to be back on our regularly scheduled Tuesday shows at 9 p.m. in the next couple weeks here. All right, so bear with me. Thank y'all, and let's talk about some crested geckos, okay? This week on the podcast, we are going over 40 of your most common crested gecko questions. Now, how are we going to do that? I'll tell you. So, we're going to be breaking that down into 5 different categories tonight. We're going to be starting off with general info, then we're going to housing and enclosures, then we're going to go over to feeding and nutrition, health and behavior, and following that up with breeding and babies. So, that's what we have to look forward to tonight. So, without anything else to do, let's get into it, all right? Let's do it. So, the first question we're going to ask is, what is a crested gecko? I'm a visual learner, so let me show you one of the babies I produced last year and get into what a crested gecko is. This right here is a tricolor lily white, okay? That was the morph of him. This is a crested gecko. As you can see here, the little spikes on the eye and these little spikes down the head and body, these are called crests. So when you see those, they are a crested gecko. They are a New Caledonian species, which brings us into our next question, number 2. Where do crested geckos come from? They originally come from New Caledonia, which is off of the east coast of Australia. That's right. They were originally thought to be extinct up until 1994 when they were rediscovered. So I think that's really cool. Since then, in 1996, they were brought to the U.S., and now there's hundreds of different breeders across the United States that are helping this species thrive and just get better and better. They're no longer endangered. Obviously, we have hundreds of breeders, so good for us, right? So with all of these crested geckos going around, and you're wanting to get one, right? Let me get back here. You need to know what you're getting into, right? So the first thing you want to know when you're getting an animal is how long am I going to have to be prepared to take care of this animal, right? So that brings us into question number 3. How long do crested geckos live? Typically, crested geckos live 15 to 20 years. Now, in captivity, they have seemed to be living longer. There's geckos I know 23, 25 years old. And so you see in captivity, they do live a little bit longer versus the wild, which is to be expected, right? How big do crested geckos get? So when crested geckos hatch out, they're between 1 and 2.5 grams, okay? And they're about 3 inches long, a little tiny thing. Okay, and then when you get to be an adult, which is considered a year and a half or 2 years, year and a half is sexual maturity, 2 years is for technically a full-grown adult ready to breed like that. So, how big is that? Just like people, crested geckos vary in size. You can have some that are really long and skinny, or you can have some that are shorter, fatter, or you can have a combination of both. I have all 3. Having 43 geckos, you really see a lot of variance in them. So you can have full-grown adults up to like 36 grams, even though you're not supposed to breed until like 40, 45. If they don't have, or 45, if they don't have their tail, it's okay to do it at 40. I try to beef them up a little bit before. We'll get into that in the breeding section. But so they're going to be typically 40 grams to 70 grams. Some of them have been getting a little bit bigger, heftier, chunkier, hefty at 80 grams. So those need to be put on a diet. But then again, some of them, they're just massive animals. I know my friends over at Alliance Reptile Collaboration, Zach and Steph, they have one girl that's like 88 grams or something like that. Humongous, but she doesn't look that overweight. Okay, she's a little chunky, but she's not overweight because she's just massive. She's a lot bigger than other crested geckos. So it kind of varies, but generally between 40 and 60 grams and about 10 inches long. So from the tip of my hand to about here is how big they're going to be getting, but that's including the tail. So the tail is about half of the size of the crested gecko. You have to keep that in your noodle up there, okay? So, question 5. Are crested geckos good for beginners? Yes, crested geckos are known as the perfect starter reptile because you are dipping your toe in care, nutrition, and these are pretty much one of the easiest animals to take care or reptiles to take care of. That being said, you still have to do all of your research so you can properly care for that gecko, right? If you're going to be taking care of something, you want to make sure that you know everything in advance, not everything, but you know as much as you can in advance so you know what you can, if anything arises, you know what to do. Okay? So, beginner pets, again, if you want a pet that is not wanting to be handled all the time, I would get a crested gecko because these are pretty much up uh, at night, but you can set the time zones that you want to do. But typically they're up at night and then go to sleep in the morning. So if you're a late night person, perfect pet for you. They love jumping around, having fun at night. So that is nice. They're also, you're feeding them every other day, but again, we'll get into that later. They are good for starter pets. If you're getting into the reptile world, I would definitely recommend a crested gecko or a bearded dragon. Bearded dragons are a little bit more advanced, but again, perfect starter reptiles for anyone wanting to get into reptiles. How are we doing today, guys? What is your most anticipated question in the Crested Gecko world? Drop them in the chat, and I'll see if I can answer any of those for you. Okay? So that is going into my next question with are they good for beginners? Do crested geckos like to be handled? Yes and no. If you're just getting a crested gecko the first day, they're not going to be handled. Remember, you're supposed to leave your crested gecko in the tank for about 2 weeks before getting it out and playing with it, having it walk on your hands, because you want them to get used to their new surroundings. So, majority of the time, I handle my geckos every other day. The reason I do that is because I've seen on the days that I feed my geckos, which is Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday. We'll get into that later in the health and nutrition part of this episode. But I see that when I handle them on days that they're being fed, that they pee and poop on me. So for a couple years now, year and a half, 2 years, okay, give or take, I only handle on days that I'm not feeding them, and I haven't got peed or pooped on in a very, very long time. So if you are tired of getting peed and pooped on, try it on days that you're not feeding them and see how that goes for you, okay? Other than that, I have geckos that like to be out for 5-10 minutes, and I have geckos that I've had for years that will be out and they'll sit on my chest, watch a movie with me, hang out, sit on my shoulder as I walk around the house, do chores, do whatever. So yeah, it just depends on how much you put into the gecko and like how much time you're wanting to work with the gecko is the more that you're going to be creating that bond with your gecko. Now, if you're handling it every day, you're probably going to be stressing it out a lot. But if you're handling it every day and it's only like 5 minutes, it's okay. But again, you have to learn the temperament of your geckos. All of my geckos here are, I typically say every other day, but I have some that want to be handled every 3 days, every 4 days. And that's just them, because I can tell as soon as I try to get them out, if they're really antsy, squirmy, or whatever, and that's not usually like them, then I know, okay, they don't want to be social right now. And that's okay, because don't we all not want to be social sometimes? I know I do. Let's see what Deez Gex has to say. Welcome, Deez Gex. It's nice to see you. Thank you for joining us. Deez Gex says, I got one that is young, but no matter what, it avoids and runs and flares its tail around. Yikes. So that is pretty typical for babies. I see, especially if you paired kind of not the calmest geckos together, that you have babies don't typically like to be handled. They're very jumpy, very flighty. Again, you're 1,000 times bigger than this little 2 gram animal, okay? So you are terrifying to them. I typically handle my babies once to 2 times a week. Again, doing like weekly checks on them and then handling them maybe once, twice. Just depends again on their mood, on my mood as well, what I'm doing. Um, so yeah, runs around and flares its tail. Are you talking about it's starting to drop its tail? If so, you may just have a really flighty gecko, and I would recommend handling it a little bit less. Like add like one more day in between handling it and see how it starts to adjust to that. See if that helps you. Let's see. Gex also says, yeah, it's definitely a bigger one out of the 6 I have. Different personality. Yeah, of course, right? So, like I said, I would probably just try to give it a little bit more time in between times that you're handling it. And again, I've gone over it in one of my other podcasts, how to handle your Crested Gecko or how to calm your Crested Gecko down. I recommend all of you go watch that if you have flighty geckos. Those are some just tips and tricks that I've learned along the past 5 years. This is year 6 that I have had Crested Geckos and have been breeding Crested Geckos. So, let's get back on track here and go on to question number 7. How can you tell if your Crested Gecko is a male or female? Okay, let us go over to my Instagram real quick. See if I can see it. Here's the picture. Okay, so I found it. Let me add that to the screen. So you can see here, this is the best picture I got. Look how cute he is. But this is the best that I have right now. When you're trying to sex your gecko, I typically recommend waiting until 15 to 28 grams because I had a gecko just recently. I thought it was female, but the last week it developed cresticles. Cresticles are this thing right here at the bottom that you can see, this little pooch. That is called the cresticles. When it is flat, completely flat, that means it's a female. If it's bulging out a little bit like this, you can see here's the very start of that. If it's bulging out, that means it is a male. Now, you can also tell by there will be a pore line right here. Okay, it's kind of, it looks like a little arrow that goes like that. You can't see it in this picture that well, but this is the best picture I have at the spur of the moment, trying to find that. But so a pore line is, you'll see little black dots in the middle of the scales all the way across here, okay? If you see that pore line, you are going to know that that is a male. I have a lot of people ask what these little white dots are as well. That is just for reproductive tendencies. Okay, I don't know how to word that. But so this basically just helps the male and female line up when they go to breed. So let us go to the next one. So we already went over why they're called crested geckos, because they have crests on them, the little spikes. They may look pointy, but they're very soft. They don't hurt at all. People think, oh, it's going to hurt or whatever. It's pointy. They're pointy, but they don't. They're very smooth, okay? You're not going to get hurt from the crests. Are crested geckos nocturnal or diurnal? So, crested geckos are diurnal. My crested geckos wake up at 8 p.m. and go to sleep at 8 a.m. So typically up from like dusk to dawn, pretty type stuff, you know? So if that's your schedule, you can do that. Or if you're working at home all day, have them in a room where you have the lights off during the day, and then at night, turn the lights on so that they just flip their schedule. It'll take a little bit of time for them to get used to it, but over like a week or so, they'll get in that routine, just like we do as humans, get in that routine after doing it several times. But you just have to be consistent with whatever you with whatever you choose to do. You have to be consistent with that, and that goes for everything with owning a crested gecko. Just make sure you're always consistent with everything that the care and handling that you provide your crested gecko. All right, what size tank does a crested gecko need? So I am a big advocate for proper tank size because I want my crested geckos to have all the room that they need, all of the what do you call it? All the sustenance and uh, I forgot, but all the foliage and stuff to make them happy, live happy lives. I am a big advocate for having them grow over time. So that what that means is 0 to 15 grams. They're in a 6 quart tub or like a 5 by 10. From 16 grams to 25 grams, they're in a 12 by 12. And then in a when they get to 26 grams and above, you're going to put them in a 18 by 18 by 24. So again, being arboreal in nature, you're always going to want to have taller tanks than wider tanks. Okay, wider is for bearded dragons, leopard geckos, stuff like that. Taller is for your arboreal geckos like crested geckos, leachianus, stuff like that. So it is very important to have the proper size tanks so that they are growing properly and so that they are living a good life. And on my Instagram, you'll always see I post a lot of what that looks like because I want people to know that this is how your gecko is growing up, that you know that when you buy from me, from Georgia Cresties, that you know you're getting a quality animal that came from a good place and was raised right. So I will show you a video real quick on what that looks like and show you one of my adult tanks that I just upgraded a week ago. So here is that. So that was from the 12 by 12 into the 18 by 18 by 24. You can see this is Walter, the first crested gecko, lily white from my Heisenberg and Galaxy pairing. This is the first lily white that I self-produced. Heisenberg and Peaches were produced out of Scarlet and Steel. Steel is from Surreal Exotics, Olivia. So this is my first fully solo production of crested gecko, of lily white crested gecko. So you can see it has a lot of foliage. It has 4 hides. I have one at the top over here. Then I have one at the side on the other side, one on the flank over here, and then one in the back over there, and a egg crate at the bottom. So again, you're gonna have 3 to 5 hides. I always typically do 4, and then you're going to have lots of foliage like you see there, okay? So if you want your gecko to be happy and loving its life, model your enclosure after this. Now, you don't have to do just this. I have these tubs and paper towels because that's the easiest way for me to do it. If you only have a couple geckos, one gecko or so, what do you what can you put them on? Okay, that gets us into our second segment tonight of housing and enclosures. So we just talked about the proper sizes for them. Now, what are we doing about crested geckos living solo or together? That is a big conversation in the crested gecko world. And for me personally, I never have crested geckos together besides breeding or like a 10-second video because the presence of another gecko is stressful for them, okay? No matter what it is, it's going to be stressful for them. Babies, they can think, if a lot of people put babies together, like from the same clutch, they'll put them together in the same tub until they're big enough, like 5, 10 grams, whatever. But what can happen when you do that is baby one thinks baby two's tail or toe is a bug, a cricket, a dubia roach, and they go after it and try to eat it, and that's how they end up losing a toe or losing part of the tail. And I don't want that to happen to my geckos, so I nip that problem in the bud, and I have them separate. Every single one of my geckos is in their own tank. Now, people do cohabitate female crested geckos on occasion. I would not recommend doing more than 2 geckos together. But again, when you are cohabiting, you have to be very, very vigilant in what you are looking at your geckos. You have to make sure you have to have a very good visual of health and attitudes, because if you have one laying on top of the other, you think, oh, that's really cute, they're snuggling. No, that's a dominance display, and you have to have a lot of food bowls as well. because you don't want one hogging all the food. You don't want one being 45 grams and the other one being 25 grams. That's just showing that they're bullying the other one, and the smaller one isn't able to get the food that it needs. So you always have to be very vigilant when you are cohabbing. I personally don't recommend it, but if you're someone that just has to cohab two females together, you can. So, welcome in. We are going over 40 of your most common crested gecko questions. So, thank y'all for joining tonight. We are getting into housing and enclosures, like I said a moment ago. Now, what kind of substrate can you use for a crested gecko? Like you saw in the video I just had, we had paper towels. Now you can also use different like paper products. Flawless Crested Geckos, they have this like brown paper that they use. But for a small time person, or if you just really want to have bioactive setups, you can have the Eco-Earth, you can have sphagnum moss, a combination of the two. There's a lot of videos on Instagram and YouTube about how to make a bioactive enclosure. If you are really interested in a bioactive, having the springtails, having the hydro balls, having all of that incorporated to where it makes an ecosystem, definitely go check that out. I do not have that set up currently. I will one day for like a few of the geckos that I'm keeping for life, but I just find it's a lot more difficult to keep up with it with if you have multiple bioactives, keeping up with all of them, especially starting it up. I know after you get it set up and going, it pretty much runs itself, but I tried it twice, and all the springtails ended up dying, even though I was feeding them. So I don't know what I was doing wrong, but that's what we're here. If you have any expertise in bioactives, let us know, okay? So we're going to go ahead and get into our next question. Do crested geckos need UVB light? So that is a yes and no question. So you only use one or the other of these, okay? You can use UVB, or you can use, when you're feeding them crickets or dubia roaches once, twice a week, you dust those in calcium with D3 if you are not using UVB, okay? One or the other, a UVB light or the calcium or the insects coated in calcium with D3. Do not use both. Do not use either. None of them. Okay. So you have to have one or the other so that they don't develop metabolic bone disease, which we'll go over later. Okay. So one or the other. Okay. Very important. Do not go without either. What temperature should their tank be? So crested geckos are pretty much like us. They have the same temperature zone as us, like what we're comfortable with. For the low, I don't like it getting below 68 or 67, 68 like that. And getting below that, they start getting chilly, just like we kind of start getting chilly under 68 degrees. And then their temperature range doesn't go up as high as ours. Their max temperature range that I would be comfortable at is 78. Anything over 78, they would start to get hot. They could start showing signs of being lethargic and just moving really slow. So you do not want to do that. How do you just want to make sure that it's between 68 and 78 degrees for them to be comfortable and live in a health or a happy life. So, how do I maintain proper humidity? Depending on where you live, this question is going to vary. But for me here in Georgia, I typically mist once a day at night. Now, for humidity, you're going to want to have a low period during the day of 30 to 40% humidity, and then at night when you're misting, and when they're going to be up, you always want the humidity to be high when they're up and active, so they can drink all the water and then absorb the humidity. Helps them shed better as well, which we'll get into as well. But so I spray once a day for where I'm living. Some people end up spraying twice a day. Just depends on how humid or dry your area is where you're living. Let's see what D's Gex got to say again. Yeah, thank you for being so involved today. I appreciate that, D's Gex. I know some who say they don't need anything but Crested Gecko diet, no additional calcium. That's what breeder told them. And I believe they need bugs occasionally for sure. calcium D3 if no UVB. So yes, let's get into that real quick. Um, so you can do just the diet. I don't recommend that at all. A lot of my adult geckos end up phasing out of insects. They don't want to eat them anymore. So what do? I make them eat them. So when I'm making their food, I have it in a blender, and so I just toss crickets into the blender and blend it up. I know it's not the prettiest thing, but for the health of your geckos, you do it. Okay, you do what needs to be done. I blend the crickets in with it, and then I just add a little bit more calcium to it. The calcium with D3, since I do not have UVB here, as you can tell. So I crickets, Crested Gecko food, which I'll go over what that is in a moment, and the crickets, so that they're still getting that protein and they're still getting the extra UVB. I would, I mean, occasionally some of my that don't eat bugs anymore will want them. I'll be like, oh, let's try seeing what they'll do, and like, oh yeah, they'll want it, but they'll only want like one or two of them out of the five, which isn't enough to fill them up. So I don't know what they're doing. Maybe it's just their natural instincts. They're like bug, and just get one, and then they remember, oh no, I don't want this. So yeah. Do crested geckos need heat lamps? If you have a consistent temperature like I have here, I'm sure you can hear my air conditioning unit over here. I have it set to 70 degrees for low at night, so it typically gets 69 to 72 is the low that I have set up in this room, and then the high I have it get to 77. It just depends on the day, really, but most of the time I have this set at 73, but the surrounding room will be 75, 76 the majority of the time. What decorations or enrichment should I add to make my Crested Gecko happy? So, like I showed earlier, you're going to want to have a lot of foliage, like I have here in this video. Let's go to it. So you can see I have a lot of foliage here. I have 4 different branches or pool noodles, as you can see, and I have these hides. Hides are just anything that can shield them from the view of you. So I always say the less that you see them, the happier they're going to be. Okay? So again, a lot of foliage, a lot of places to hide. They will be very happy. Okay? So, how often should I clean the enclosure? I clean my enclosures once a week, okay? Now, if I see one that's like really bad in the middle of the week, I'll change it out real quick. I'll do like a quick wipe down, but I always change it. I always clean all of the tanks once a week, okay? Just to make sure, because they can, I don't know what they're doing in there, but they just like to go Rampage Jackson on these tanks. And I'll set it up all nice, neat, and everything, and then in the morning, everything's thrown everywhere. There's gecko food on the sides of the tank. There's all these foliage limbs that have been ripped out of the pool noodles. And I'm just like, did you have a WWE match in there or something? Like, it's crazy. But I fix it for them still because that's what they deserve. Now, let's get into our third topic, feeding and nutrition. Okay? What do crested geckos eat? We touched on it a few minutes ago. They eat a powdered food called Pangea. That's what I use, growth and breeding formula. It has all of the nutrition in it that they need. It has the calcium they need, and it has the insects in it. But it looks just like a protein, like a whey protein, just a regular powder, and you add water to it, and you make it a paste, kind of like the consistency of ketchup. That's what you're going to be giving them. And then, like I said, once a week I give crickets to my geckos. I'm actually currently trying to grow my own dubia roach colony. So hopefully in the next year, you're on me, right? Yeah. Okay, and hopefully in the next year, I'll be able to start to switch them over from crickets to dubia roaches, and I'll be able to just have that instead of having to spend $10 to $20 every week going and getting crickets for the geckos. I don't mind doing it because that's what they need, but this would be a way to help me more, and so I'm trying to get that on track. It is hard to do that. You just have to be consistent with it. Like I said earlier, consistency is key in breeding crested geckos and owning crested geckos. Um, How often should you feed your crested gecko? I touched on it for a second there. I feed Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday. Monday and Wednesday, I'm feeding the Pangea growth and breeding. And then on Saturday is when I feed insects, okay? The reason I have it set up like that is because when I feed Wednesday, I want them to get a little bit hungrier so that they're wanting to eat more of the crickets, okay? More of the insects, whatever you decide to give them. Okay, so that means that they're going to be ingesting more protein. That means they're going to be getting bigger, quicker, faster. They're going to be growing at a quicker rate, especially when you are gut loading your insects as well. Gut loading, what is that? Is when you're giving your insects some nutrition, whether that's potatoes, apples, fruits of various um, assortments, lettuce, like that. You're feeding your geckos food, basically. Um, you're pouring into them so that they pour into your geckos, make them bigger, stronger, and healthier. So, next question. What is the best Crested Gecko diet brand? Now, that is a very hard one to discuss or like get into. I don't think there is one specific best one because they all change over the years. So Pangea used to be the staple. I know a lot of people swear by LaGuardia or the natural river diet. I think that's the name of it. And there's been a lot. And then so whenever a new one comes out, I'm very skeptical of it because it hasn't been proven. And so I like to wait until there's a little bit more research done on it, on what is in the food before I give it to my geckos. Because again, I don't want to experiment with these all of my animals. Not good. Okay, they're not something that I would be interested in. So what is sorry? Can crested geckos eat insects? Definitely. Okay. Like we were just talking about, they love to have crickets. They love to have dubia roaches. I do not feed mealworms because of the hard exoskeleton. That could be, especially when the gecko is younger, that can make it harder for them to digest and cause impaction. So I do not feed them anything with a hard exoskeleton, like a superworm. So, or mealworm, sorry, mealworm. Do the, do they need calcium or vitamin supplements? Yes, like we touched on earlier, they need to have calcium with D3 at least once a week if you're not going to be giving UVB light. If you give UVB light, disregard that, okay? Too much is harmful, none at all is very harmful as well. They can both lead to metabolic bone disease, and we don't want that, right? So, can baby food be used as a treat or food? This was a common misconception earlier in the stages of breeding them, again, because they've only been around for like 30 years or so. People are like, oh, this is a apricot or applesauce baby food, and they can eat it because it's mushy. But we saw over time that that didn't have the enough nutritional value for them, and it was causing a decline in their health. So do not use baby food for your gecko. Leave the baby food for your babies and your gecko food for your geckos. Okay. Um, what fruits can crested geckos eat? A good rule of thumb is nothing acidic. Okay. You don't want to be giving your geckos anything acidic because that is toxic to them. I recommend apples. I recommend peaches, strawberries, banana, apricot. If you see it on the front of one of your crested gecko food bags, I would give it to them. Okay. Any of the different flavors that you can get, fig and insect, whatever. Apricot, peach, any of those type of things, you can give that to them, but sparingly, okay? Once a month, maybe twice a month if you do it, if you're not giving them that much, but I typically use it just like as a treat. And what I do is mash it up, kind of like have it as a puree to make it easier for them to eat. I'm not making them chomp on a banana. I don't want them hurting their jaws. I've seen people that have had them try to eat harder, uh, harder fruits, and the gecko broke its jaw from trying to eat the hard fruit. So, err on the side of caution, mash it up for them, okay? Make it easy on them. Next question. How do I know if my gecko is eating enough? I get this question all the time, and the simplest answer I can come up with is if you see poop in the tank, they're eating. Okay, a lot of people try to overfeed their gecko, and then they see all of it left in the cup, and they're like, "Oh no, it's not eating enough," or they're like, "Oh, it didn't eat for one day." There's a very good reason for that. A lot of the times when a crested gecko is about to shed, they will not eat for a day or two before they shed, but generally, like the day after they shed, they'll be eating. Okay, as well as females. Females, when they're about to lay eggs, they will not eat for a day or two beforehand. So if you are in that situation, don't automatically freak out. It's completely normal for them not to eat before either of those things happen just because it's a stressful time for them and they're not focused on eating, they're focused on shedding or laying eggs, you know? So, um, like I said, if you see poop, you're good, okay? Another thing I see, why is my crested gecko turning pale? Why is it gray all of a sudden? That is called firing down, okay? Crested geckos can have the capability to fire up and fire down. Okay, fire up is typically when they're active, when they're stressed out, or when they're happy, or when they're eating. Typically, you'll see them most fired up when they're really stressed out because they're they're upset. Okay, they're not feeling good, uh, or typically if they're not feeling well, they'll be fired down. Fired down means that they're a very neutral color, blend in with their environment. They could be sleeping, they could be just very, very calm. I've had geckos, I've gotten out of their tank when they fired up at night just because they're up and active. And then I got them out, they're fired up for a few minutes, and then they calm down being with me. And they're like, oh, this isn't scary or anything like that. And they fire down while they're with me, and so it doesn't hurt them at all. It's completely natural. You don't have to worry about them being hurt or anything. Um, it's completely natural. It happens all the time. And there's actually this cool thing called a misfire, where if you have a gecko up to near the light source and it has part of its body hidden by leaves, plants, whatever, the part that's hitting the sun, or the part of the gecko that's being hit by the sun, light, that it fires up, and so that's very, very dark. And then the parts that's covered up by foliage, okay, let's just say foliage, that part is fired down. And so it's really, really cool. Again, doesn't hurt them at all. It's just something really interesting to see. Let's see what D's Gex has to say. I agree. All breeders I got my geckos from say they will not eat mealworms, etc. I have no issues as they will come out in the light and hammer live insects fast. Yeah, especially if you start giving your crested geckos insects like around 3 to 5 grams. I typically wait till 5 grams because I want them to be set up on and used to eating the crested gecko diet, whether you're giving um, Pangea, LaGuardia, Blue River diet. That's what it was, Blue River diet. Any of those, you want to make sure that they're eating that before they get dependent upon only insects, because that's going to cost you a lot more, and you don't want to have to be there every time you have to feed them. You don't have to be there just giving them insects. You could make it easier for you. You don't have to go out and get insects every single time you're going to feed them. You can have that powder ready to go. Stored away and just bring it out, feed them like that. So don't get picky geckos, all right? Make sure that they start out on the diet and then go to insects. But yeah, it's really fun to watch them and just like pounce on them real quick. It's cool to watch them eat. So, what should I do, or how often do crested geckos shed? Okay, so when they hatch, they're gonna shed within the first 12 hours, and a lot of the times you're not gonna see them shed because they're gonna eat it. Their shed is a great source of calcium, so if you ever see some of it, it's special. Not really, but it's special because they hadn't eaten it. I've had this girl right here. She's given me a full shed one time. I've kept it. It's in a bag in my closet over there, but it's a complete full shed from the tip of the nose to the tip of the tail, including the toe tips. A complete shed. I have no idea how she did it, how she got it all off without ripping it or anything, but it's very, very cool to see. But as they get older, they'll shed less and less. So typically, like I said, when they hatch, it's within 12 hours, and then it gets to about every week. And then as they're getting into juvenile and adult stage, they'll shed about once a month. Most of the time, they're going to be doing that in the middle of the night, so you're not going to be seeing that. But if you do, that's just a sign that they're growing and everything's going well. Piggybacking onto that, what should I do if my gecko has stuck shed? Do not do what these influencers online do and get a air can and blow into the skin and have the skin lift off. That's basically like just ripping their skin off. I can't imagine that feels well. I don't know how you would react if your skin is just being ripped off, but I can't imagine that being pleasant. So I will never do that to my geckos. I highly recommend you never do that to your geckos. Um, the best way to get stuck shed off is put them into their travel container, a little small container, have a piece of paper towel on the bottom, and then fill it with lukewarm water, okay? Barely warm, because warm to us is hot to them, okay? So barely warm water, have it to where it just covers the tops of their feet. Okay, so there's no issue of drowning, no issue of them getting overheated and dying. And again, ventilated travel container. And you're going to have them sit in it for 10 to 20 minutes, check on them every 3 to 5 minutes just to make sure they're not showing too much stress or anything like that. If they're getting too hot, being lethargic, stuff like that, eyes start sinking in, those are signs to get them out immediately. But typically after that, a lot of the stuck shed will become loose. Most of the time, the stuck shed is going to be on the eyelashes, is going to be on the fingernails, all over the fingers, and the tail. The reason you don't want stuck shed is because, especially around the fingers, it can cut off blood flow and then eventually lead to them losing that toe from where the shed was stuck. So you put them in the lukewarm bath, and there's still a little bit there. What do? Get a Q-tip and then rub very, very gently. Remember, they're very, very tiny animals. Very, very gently rub against the grain and just do a little twisting motion to try to get the stuck shed off. Usually that works for me every time. And then put them back into their tank. Now, do this sparingly. I would say no more than once a month, okay? If your crested gecko is having that much issue shedding and it's constantly getting stuck shed on them, you need to check your humidity and change something there, because their shed directly relates to the humidity in their tank and how well that is regulated. So if you're always having stuck shed, check your humidity and change something. Make sure you're in the proper levels like I talked about earlier, and your crested gecko will stop having those shedding issues. So is it normal for my crested gecko to hide all day? Yes, they're sleeping, okay? Like we talked about, they're diurnal. They get up at 8 p.m., go to sleep at 8 a.m. They're going to be asleep every time you walk by them, okay? Do not expect to, at 1, 2 p.m., go in there and be like, oh, hey, let's play. No, they're dead asleep. They don't want to be around anyone, okay? Do you want someone coming to you at 2 a.m. and be like, hey, let's play? Most of the, depending on the situation, okay, depending on the situation, the answer most of the time is no, okay? Sometimes you answer yes, but most of the time it's no. You don't want to have fun at 2, 3 a.m. You want to go to sleep. Just like them, they want to go to sleep. Why is my crested gecko making noises? That can be for several reasons. One, they're stressed out, they're angry, they can make a little squeak. They really sound like little ducks to me whenever they make noise. When you go to touch a gecko and they shake their head and do the little like duck sound, that means stop touching me, okay? So a lot of people I've seen online be like, oh, it's so cute, but they're literally telling you no. They're shaking their head as fast as they can and they're like that. That means leave me the heck alone, okay? Um, uh, what are signs of stress in crested geckos? So being very sunken, having their head down all the time, like if you're trying to hang out with them and they're just like stuck to the bottom of your hand, like that, if they're just like stuck to your hand, not moving, that's a sign of stress. If they're trying to get away from you constantly, like just immensely just trying to run away from you at whatever cost, they're probably stressed out. If you're yanking them out of their tank too fast, they'll be stressed out. If you have them around other animal or other like bigger animals, dogs, cats, whatever, that could stress them out as well. Loud sounds can stress them out as well. So it's just different things that 6, 7, different things that stress them out, and you just try to limit them. You can't limit everything. You can't get rid of every situation because these things are just finicky little lizards. What is metabolic bone disease? So, metabolic bone disease is a disease crested geckos uh, acquire after prolonged periods of low calcium or not enough calcium. What that does is it creates kinks in their back, so it makes them deformed. And at the base of their tail, kind of where their butt is, it curves it as well. So it doesn't. It makes it to where the gecko should not be bred because the eggs will just get stuck and then cause impaction, and that can lead to death if you don't have that treated by a vet. So you will also see a kinked tail, like little like kinks in the tail, a little wavy. Those are signs of metabolic bone disease, and they typically look a little bit skinnier, a little bit. Yeah, I wouldn't say emaciated at all because you could be feeding it fine and everything, but they definitely have a skinnier, malnourished look. Even if they're not malnourished, they're just like that doesn't look quite right. You have geckos, you're like, oh, that's a beautiful, healthy gecko, that's awesome, and then you have ones you look at, you're like, something ain't right there. Hold up. Wait a minute. Something ain't right. Okay, so getting into breeding and babies for our last and final section of 40 questions that are most common. 40 most common questions about crested geckos that y'all have. I got it out. We got there. Let's keep going. What age can crested geckos breed? Like I said, they go through sexual maturity at 1.5. That doesn't mean breed them then, okay? Just because you went through sexual maturity at 13, 14 years old does not mean you're ready to have sexual intercourse, okay? Just like crested geckos. They need to have time to mature, so I wait till at least 2 years old, okay? That's when I will start breeding a crested gecko, but it's also weight dependent. If you have a 2-year-old gecko and it's 30 grams, do not breed it, okay? They have to be 2 years old and at least 45 grams, in my opinion, to make sure that they're healthy and have enough weight on them for when they lose weight over the breeding season, that they're not getting malnourished, not getting, not starving, anything like that, or losing too much weight to the point where they wither away. Not wither away, but just do poorly. How can I prepare for breeding geckos? That is a very good question. Like I mentioned before, in my breeding crested geckos, you have to actually know why you're breeding the gecko and what you expect to get out of it. If you're just doing it because you want more geckos to have more babies, that's cool. If you don't have a plan at all, you're not a breeder wanting to go to expos and sell or go online and be like a big breeder. You just want more geckos. That's how I started out, just breeding it. That's perfectly fine. But if you want to be a breeder and have increase the health, structure, and beauty of your crested geckos, you need to really look at the crested geckos that you're getting and that you're wanting to breed as well. Again, making sure that your crested geckos have the proper space, proper time to mature, and get to breeding weight and fighting ready, you know? How many eggs do they lay? So that typically varies. When you get a crested gecko and it's first breeding season, they can lay 4 or they can lay 18 eggs. You never know. I have a gecko, Athena. She's a super breeder, in my opinion, because her first year she produced 18 babies. Not just eggs, and like some failed. 18 babies came out of her. The next year it was 16. Yeah, so within 2 years I had over 30 geckos from just her. So it really depends on the gecko. You'll just have to see what you get when you get your gecko, but typically you'll get between 8 and 14 eggs from your geckos. That is what you should expect, and then when you are, sorry, I'm getting a cramp in my leg. Um, when you are getting ready to have space for them, you need to make sure you have space for these geckos to go. You have to plan. Oh, this gecko could lay 14 or could have 14 babies that come out. I have to be prepared to house these and take care of them, having the food, having the shelter for them, and having the time to take care of them as well. How long does it take for the eggs to hatch? Well, when you're incubating at 68 degrees, they will hatch between 90 and 128 days or 120 days. You want them to incubate longer because that just means they're going to be healthier, be way more, have better structure because they were able to develop more in the egg. Now, you can incubate at 72 degrees, 74 degrees if you're just really impatient and want to pop out geckos to sell and you're not really worried about the structure of them or how much they weigh to begin with. If you just want babies, incubate at 72, 74 degrees, and they'll come out within 2 months, 60 days. So, but if you're really wanting to plan to further the species, for get even deeper into your projects and improve your projects, you want to incubate them longer so they're healthier, stronger, better structure, better looking, all of that fun stuff, right? Right. Do baby crested geckos eat the same as adults? Yes, they do. Okay? Sorry I'm acting weird. I still have a cramp in my leg trying to make that go away. But we're almost done here. Just stick with me for a few more. If you haven't noticed, we're in the bonus period. That's right, I'm giving you more than 40 of your most common crested gecko answers or questions, and I'm answering more than that, okay? That's what we're doing here on the Cresty Conversations. We're going above and beyond for y'all because we always go above and beyond for our geckos, right? Right. So, when do I separate baby geckos? For me, immediately. Right after they hatch, as soon as I see them in there, I take them out and I separate them. People, like I mentioned earlier, people do otherwise, but I always say for the health and safety of your gecko, immediately. And last but not least, what made you fall in love with crested geckos? Well, look at that adorable face, okay? When you look at your crested gecko's face and you see those two brain cells like you see here, okay? When you look here and see those two brain cells coming together and looking at you, just look how adorable that is. And then having their feet being very, not sticky, but having the ability to cling to other surfaces because the neurons in their toes react to the neurons in the object opposite of it. They make a super, super strong bond that let them climb walls, climb glass, plastic, wood, all of that good stuff. But yeah, and so also it is the way they make you feel when you're holding them. I always feel a sense of like calm and happiness whenever I am handling my geckos. It's just like my happy time. I get to just chill out in the room and be with my geckos, and I wouldn't trade it for nothing. Um, and also I love just being able to watch them grow and see that something I created has turned into something so beautiful, something so awesome. It's just like the reward you see after all of that hard work you've put in. It's just something that is very, very cool to see. It's a very rewarding feeling as well. So, if no one else has any other questions, that is going to be the end of this episode of Cresty Conversations. But first, let me check my egg box, okay? Because one of our last episodes, I had a baby hatch right after I hit end on the live. So I'm gonna see if I can get y'all, because we're right around day 110, 115 for some of these eggs. I have four, I think four, 3 or 4 clutches that are about to hatch. So let me check that real quick, and I'll let you know if we have any brand new geckos that hatched within the last hour. Okay? Give me 1 second. Go over to my incubator, pull out the eggs. Nope, I just got some fat eggs over here. I got 1, two, three, four. Four clutches that are about to hatch. So, if you want to see what those geckos look like, follow me on Instagram, and when they hatch, you'll be one of the first to see the brand new Crested geckos. And these are going to be very, very exciting geckos to see because it'll be my first fully in-house lily white and my best extreme harlequin project to date that I have. So have very high expectations for what these babies will look like, especially when you look at the parents. Go look at them on my stories on Instagram. Insane structure, insane lineage going back. It's something to look out for, okay? So, with that being said, thank you again for being here and joining me on Crestie Conversations here on the Geckoverse podcast channel. Sorry, I had a brain fart. I appreciate your time and learning about Crested geckos with me. I hope we all learned a little bit something new, something different from what you once thought. Yeah. With that being said, I will see you on the next episode of Crestie Conversations. Keep it Crestie, bestie.